This is the Baymaw Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are talking about Genesis 12 through 14, the call of Abram and his initial adventures in the land of Canaan.
Yeah, we're going to pick up in the story of Abram. We found out last episode, Brent, that the story of Abram probably begins a little earlier than a lot of us would have thought. It begins all the way back in Genesis 11. And so today we're going to start where we usually think the story starts, but it's actually not. It's actually the second chapter of Avram's story.
He came in just a few verses earlier, but those few verses turned out to be pretty important.
According to Jewish tradition, packed full of unbelievable treasures and goodies. We found out that what God, in the Jewish perspective, God's wanting to partner with somebody. He didn't just arbitrarily choose somebody out of the blue. There was a reason that God showed up and wanted to partner with Abraham, and it's because Abraham was willing to do the right thing on behalf of others. Abraham is willing to care for others before himself. He saw that there was good that needed to be done. He and his brother, Nahor, saw that there were a couple women that were probably going to be marginalized and needed to be taken care of. And so Avram seemed to voluntarily, if we follow that Hebraic reasoning, he puts himself in a place of saying, I'm okay not having a name. I'm okay. Let's go do this because it's the right thing to do, let alone what happens to me or my future or my story. Let's do the right thing no matter what comes of it. And that causes God to show up and say, somebody who's trusting the story. I can work with somebody like that. And immediately God shows up. So now we're going to start the story where God has something to say. So if you want to, start us off in Genesis 12, Brent.
The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you."
All right. Lelecha, go. A verse that I think a lot of us just read and we're like, okay, sure, this is the beginning of a story. And yet this is a huge, huge request that God's making, a huge call on Avram's life that God is placing. Because to leave your father's house, I mean, their world isn't like our world, Brent. They're not waiting for their kids to grow up and leave. Everybody stays in your father's house. Your father's house, which is also known as a Beit Av, by the way, Beit Av, house of the father, Beit Av. Beit Av, let's spell that. Everybody wants to know how to spell B-E-I-T space A-V. Beit Av. Av is father, Beit is house. So Beit Av, house of the father. Another word that gets used in the Hebrew is mishpacha. That's a fun word to say. Mishpacha. Mishpacha maybe more appropriately would be understood in the English maybe as family. So mishpacha would be family. Beit Av is like household. So Avram is told to leave his father's Beit Av, to leave your Beit Av, your father's household. And his father's household is what he belongs to. Leave your father's house. He's tied. You don't just grow up and move out. Until your father dies, you live with your father. You support your father, what your father does for a living and the business he's involved in and the things that he wants to accomplish. And his children don't grow up and move away. They grow up in his house and help support his legacy, his faith, his calling, and the whole extended family essentially lives together.
Yeah, this is kind of maybe a difficult concept for our modern minds because it's just so different than how we structure ourselves. Like that's the goal. Like this just seems like backwards from everything that we know about.
Right. Like we give people a hard time, like, oh, you're still living in your parents' basement kind of an idea. But in their world, that was the cultural assumption. Actually, to leave would be a dishonoring thing to do. Like your father's house, this refers to your whole family's living, like whatever they do for a business, your family's faith. Like your family members, your belonging, your understanding of the world, your cultural narratives, like the stories that you tell. Think about the way that we grew up learning, nursery rhymes or the things that shaped our worldview when we were really little. This is all packed together. It's their culture. Like their Beit Av is the thing that has been the engine and the motor behind their cultural experience. And so to leave your father's household, This is a big deal. He's leaving not only what other things do you think he might be leaving? Brent, we kind of already said it, but he's not just leaving his dad's house or his dad's business, but also what else?
Like their whole way of life, their beliefs, their priorities.
And when you say beliefs, like primarily Avram's...
What does Abraham even understand about God at this point? Because like we're going to see him come into this whole understanding over the next few chapters of who God is. So what does he even know? Like, is he even worshiping the same God, or is it a different God?
Right. And the Jewish tradition is actually going to play out. Like what he's doing is he's leaving his father's gods. Like Terah has gods. And I feel like on some level when we hear this story, I feel like Abram is somewhat following in the footsteps of his dad. His dad was already on the move, if you remember. Like they were on the move away from Babylon. They were going west. Like they were headed in a direction. He was leaving his house, and then his son Haran dies, and he stops, whether that's because of grief or mourning. Like dad stops, and God shows up and says, Abram, you can't stop. I need you to keep going. Like you've got to leave. But I feel like Avram's dad, Terah, he already had this like countercultural swim against the flow. Maybe he already had that in him, but he stops short, and God says to Abram, you have to keep going. The Jewish tradition actually tells a little midrash, a little story. It's just a made-up story. But they tell the story about Abram the night before he leaves. He gets up in the middle of the night, and he goes into his father's house where he keeps all the idols, all his gods, his Babylonian gods. And he takes an axe, and he smashes all the gods except for one. And then he takes the axe and he puts it in the hands of the last remaining idol. And so Terah wakes up the next morning, and he walks in, and he's like, what has happened? What did you do? And Abram says, well, I think it's pretty obvious what happened. I see all these idols broken to pieces. I see one idol holding an axe. Like, it's pretty clear what happened. This idol here has destroyed all your other idols. And Terah says, that's ridiculous. Like, these are just idols. I carved them with my own hands. To which Abram responds, then why do you bow down to them? And that's one of the midrashic tales that it tells before Abram leaves. Like, he leaves because he has to. His dad didn't go far enough. He was willing to ask a certain level of questions, but he wasn't willing to let go of the things he needed. And Avram's going to set out from his father's house. He's going to leave his father's gods, and he's going to follow this calling that Adonai, the Lord, is going to put on his life. So whenever you're ready, you can read. Let's go back up to 12:1 and read the first 3 verses here.
The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
Right. So we have God kind of defining this partnership. He shows up with a blessing like this first. God finally speaks, and he says, I want to partner with you, Abraham. And notice the blessing. I want to partner with you. We're not just blessed to be blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing, I've heard others say. Like, God wants to put the world back together. God wants to bless. How many nations does it say in there, Brent? How many nations?
All peoples. Where does it say nations? All peoples.
Last verse, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So God says, I want to bless everyone else, and I want to work through you to be that blessing. So this partnership that God's forming is missional in nature. It's not just transactional. He's not just trying to bless Abraham. He wants to bless Abram because through Abram, through their relationship, through their covenantal partnership, God's going to bless the rest of the world. He's going to put the rest of the world back together. So notice that nature of the covenant there. And we can look at the next couple verses.
So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there.
Now, remind us from the last episode, Brent, who is Lot? We say Lot, but who is that character?
Yeah, his nephew, I guess.
Yes, his nephew. It's his brother, his dead brother's son. So Haran was the brother that died, and we were told that he had these children. Lot was one of them. And so he takes Sarai, his wife, and he takes Lot, which is his nephew. Now, why does he take Lot? Why do you suppose he takes, why do that? Like, if he's going to set out, take Sarai and set out. Like, just like Lot, he's a part of Terah's household. Why is he taking Lot?
Yeah, it is weird. And also, just to point out, the place that they stop is also called Haran.
Absolutely.
So the brother who died is Haran, but also the place where they're stopped at this point is Haran. But somebody has to take care of Lot. But it does seem weird that Abram would take that on, because wouldn't it fall to the father?
Right. And when you listen to Jewish teaching here, and I learned this through Rabbi David Foreman over at Aleph Beta, who we're going to use and we're going to quote a lot throughout our Bema journey. He's been a really big shaping teaching voice for me. But when he taught this, he said he's brought Lot because God's just made him a promise. He's made him a promise that he's going to give him descendants. He's going to bless him through, I will make your name, I'll make you into a great nation. In one sense, like, Avram has no idea. He knows, as we said in the last episode, we believe he knows that Sarai is barren. We believe that's even why he's picked Sarai as this kind of act of justice and restoration. He wants to take care of this woman who's not going to be taken care of. And so he takes Lot because God says, I'm going to make you into a nation. And he looks at his barren wife and he says, well, it's not going to come through her. So it's going to be Lot and his descendants. I need to take Lot. And on one hand, it's a great act of faithfulness. Like, it's Abram believing in God's promise. God said he's going to give me a nation. The only way he can logically fathom that happening is through Lot. So he brings Lot with him. And that makes all kinds of sense. Now, we know in the story, spoiler alert, it's not going to come through Lot. It's going to come through somebody else. But Avram doesn't know that. Avram said, God said he's going to make me into a nation. I just married a barren wife. I better take some people with me. So he brings Lot in the Jewish mind so that God can make good on his promise. As far as he can tell, he's setting up God to make good on his promise. That's why he brings Lot. Go ahead and keep reading.
Well, and also, I just like how they really shortcutted this whole journey. Like, if you have a study Bible or something with a biblical map that you can look at, the amount of travel that just happened in those two verses is pretty amazing.
Right, absolutely.
Avram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Avram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him.
Now, just think of probably 3 episodes ago, Brent, we talked about the story of the Tower of Babel. And we talked about how at the central piece of that story and that chiasm there is this idea of settling. And these people are moving geographically further and further away from the heart of the story. They're moving east, getting further east, going east. And then they go to settle, and God says, I can't have you settle. Like, it's a central heart of the story. God doesn't want them to settle. And so you're reading the story and you're like, no, God, don't promise Avram land. If you tell him that you're going to give him this land, what do you think Avram's going to do, Brent? What would your expectation be?
He's going to okay, well, let's set up shop.
Absolutely. He's going to set up shop. He's going to settle. He's going to do exactly what we just saw in the tower story that God didn't want him to do. God, what are you doing? And yet, notice the character of Abram. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Abram, too, builds a tower, we might say. Both stories are about towers, but they're two different kinds of towers. The tower that the people of Babel were building were for them and for their name. Avram builds a tower that's not for him. It's a different kind of tower. We call them altars. It's a tower to God and God's name. He calls on the name of the Lord in this story. So he built an altar there because the Lord who had appeared to him. Okay, go ahead.
From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Avram set out and continued toward the Negev.
All right, there's those same repeated ideas that Avram is building altars and pitching tents. Like, Avram sees himself as mobile. It's different. It's opposite of what we found in the Tower of Babel story, where they were trying to make themselves permanent and build an altar to their name. This Abram, he's building a tower to God's name and making himself mobile. Because a tent, what's the nature of a tent, Brent?
It's temporary.
It's temporary. Avram's saying, I don't know what God's going to do next, but I'm going to follow. I'm following God, but I do know that God's glory, God's worship, God's name. So I'm going to build altars and pitch tents is what I'm going to do. And that's this. I think we see something in the character of Abram when we read that. But go ahead and give us the next verse.
Yeah, and just again, lots of geographical terms here. So the atlas will prove very useful. You can see how Abram is moving through the land. Those details are in the text. So take a look at the map and see that.
Yep. He's kind of waiting to hear, like, okay, God, is it? I picture him in my mind, like, is it here? Is it here? Is it here? But he is staying mobile. And he's worshiping. He's making sure that God is the fixture. He is the one following. And I love that.
Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe.
All right. So now there's a famine. Happens a lot in the Bible. As you read the Bible more and more, you're going to keep hearing about famines all the time. Common thing that they dealt with in the middle of this desert region. If there wasn't the right amount of rain, you had yourself a real problem. And whenever there's a famine, everybody goes to the same place, Brent. They head down to Egypt. Because in Egypt, there's this huge river called the Nile. We've probably heard of it. And there is a region called the Nile Delta. It's going to be a big part of the biblical narrative by the time we're done. But this Nile Delta, no matter how bad the drought is, and no matter how bad the famines are, the Nile always has water in it, and the Nile always floods every single year. And in the ancient world, the Nile Delta was always one of the most fertile places on planet Earth. Even today, the Nile still floods. It's still an unbelievably fertile region. I have tried to find this issue. There was an issue of a National Geographic that was out years and years ago, and the archives don't go back far enough. There is a library here in Cincinnati that has like decades worth of National Geographics, and I am bound and determined to go find it at this library here in Cincinnati. But it did a cover article about the most fertile soil on planet Earth. And number 3 and 2 are in the United States. It's the great farming plains of Central America, United States. And then there's the Pacific Northwest United States, where the volcanic mineral content really makes the soil mineral dense and just really rich in its ability to be used for farming. But number one still today is the Nile Delta. I remember in that article, they did a cutaway. Of the soil where there was like 4-6 feet of topsoil in the Central Plains region of the United States. There's like 6 feet of topsoil in the Pacific Northwest. But there's 100 feet of farmable topsoil in the Nile Delta. It's always the place you go when there's a famine because there's always going to be something being produced. No matter how bad the famine, you always go down to Egypt. Now, when I say that and we read verse 10, Brent, is there anything that seems off to you about Avram's actions as a reader?
Well, I noticed that phrase, to live there for a while.
Okay.
Which is not what he's been doing up to this point. He's doing all these tents and all these temporary things.
I've never noticed that before. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, to live there for a while. Look at that. Sure. And it's not permanent, but he is going down to live there, which kind of speaks to the greater issue that I'm seeing, which is, do you have any other thoughts about that?
I mean, yeah, part of it is we just don't know exactly. Like there are lots of physical places that are put in here that we can look at on a map, but we don't have a specific time for any of this stuff. So
right.
Live there for a while. What does that mean? Set up a tent. Like, I mean, sure, tent is temporary, but that doesn't mean you can't be there for a little while. So we don't know exactly, but yeah.
Yeah. When I read this, thinking of my Sunday school mind, I'm like, no, Abram, what are you doing? Just trust God. Like, why are you going down and putting your trust in Egypt? Like, why are you going down to live there? Like Avram's story has been 2 or 3 different elements of like, look at his character. Look at his character. This is a guy who trusts the story. This is a guy who trusts the story. What I love about verse 10 is it shows me that Abram is no like fantasy hero wearing a cape with a gigantic A on his chest. Like, he's not perfect. He's like you and me. Abram is doing his best to follow God. And which one of us, like who among us, has not wrestled with the tension of what does it mean to be responsible and faithful? And what does it mean to trust? And like, when am I supposed to go do something? When am I supposed to sit back and wait on the Lord? Like, there's a famine. Like, am I supposed to go provide for my family? Is God wanting me to go do more stuff? Like, Avram's in that same space. He's trying to be faithful. He's using logic and reason and responsibility and the concepts. If we give him the benefit of the doubt, he's trying to be a good steward. And he knows I don't have enough here, so I got to go where there is enough. So as a reader, I'm going, no, Abram, what are you doing? And yet I get to remind myself, Avram's just like you and me. He's not perfect. We're going to see this story is going to head south here in a moment. Like, probably should have stayed and trusted the story. It's going to be a little icky here in a few verses, but he's just like you and me. And this is how, it's not right, wrong. It's how life is. It's what it means and what it looks like to try to follow God and trust the story. So I love that in verse 10.
As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you.
And this is the paragraph where I want us to pause and get some context here, because, boy, we are quick to we just throw Abram right under the bus. And I'm not going to try to save him out from under the bus, but some context is going to be a little bit helpful here. Like, we read this and the way that Abram's just trying to save his own skin, and he's just going to throw his beautiful wife out there on the chopping block and just, he's just trying to save himself. Here he is, so selfish. There's more to it when you look at the words of what's being said. In this ancient patriarchal culture, Abram, a patriarch, the person in charge of a household, is going to be responsible for marrying off all of the daughters or any of the women in his household that are under his care. If they're unmarried, it's his responsibility. He's concerned that with this beautiful wife, people are going to want to come after him and eliminate him, murder him, kill him, and get to his wife. So he has this plan. We're here to save ourselves from the famine. So here's what we're going to do, Sarai. We're going to say that you're my sister, which, by the way, is on every technical level in the Hebrew Semitic language true. I don't know how it works in Egyptian languages, but as the story is told in the Hebrew, that's true. You have vertical and horizontal relationships in the Hebrew. So a father is your father, but it's also your grandfather and your great-grandfather and your great-great-grandfather, and any predecessor is a father. When I go to be buried with my fathers, I'm a descendant of my fathers. A father is my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. It's every vertical relationship. Then horizontal relationships in the Beit Av, if you're not directly descendant vertically, everything else falls under sister. That is a catch-all word that doesn't just refer to your direct biological sister, but it also would refer to your nieces. It would refer to your cousins. It would refer to... So Abraham here is telling a deceptive half-truth, or we might even say a deceptive full truth. He's taking the truth and he's trying to deceive people with it. She's my niece, we saw last episode. She's my sister. Not my sister, but he's trying to get people to be deceived by that, thinking she's not his wife. She's a sister, she's a daughter, she's a niece, she's whatever. She's not married to him. Because what's going to happen is if you want to marry, you come to the patriarch, Brent, and what do you bring?
All sorts of gifts.
Oh, baby. There's all kinds of discussion about things called the mohar, the dowry, the bride price. You come bringing gifts. You want to woo the patriarch so that he might give the hand of the woman to you in marriage. So Avram is expecting, we're going to go down to Egypt. I got this beautiful wife. I'm going to make people think she's available. They're going to give us a whole bunch of gifts, a whole bunch of wealth, trying to woo us, trying to convince me. And then under the cover of nightfall, we'll just get out of there before there's a wedding, and we'll just take all these gifts and we'll be provided for. This is what, because that's what he says. Verse 13, say you are my sister so that I will be treated well. That Hebrew phrase means materially blessed. Say you are my sister so that I will be, he's not just trying to save his skin. He has a plan. He has a plan. Let's go get the things that we need, and then we'll get out of Egypt. So say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well, materially blessed for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. This is the context of what's going on. He's not just trying to save his own skin and put his wife out there so that he's trying to purposely, he has a plan that he's trying to shrewdly, even if deceptively, exploit here. He's not perfect. Avram's just like you and me. He's doing his best. He's probably worried for his life on multiple levels. I'm not, please don't mishear me. I'm not letting off the hook for mistreating his wife, but he and Sarai have a plan together, which makes all kinds of sense until it doesn't. Go ahead and keep reading, Brent.
When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman.
Sounds to me like it's going just as they had planned, right?
Right to plan so far. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace.
Whoopsie daisy. There's one person that doesn't court first and then ask. There's one person that just takes because of the power pyramid, because of the power differential, because of the power dynamic. Pharaoh doesn't court anybody. Pharaoh doesn't answer to anybody. Pharaoh sees and takes. It's the one person that Abram didn't think about. Everybody else would have had to have come and courted Abram and given him gifts. But Pharaoh sees, takes, and then, go ahead and give me verse 16.
He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels.
All right, so there's that material blessing. So the plan kind of works and horribly fails. Exactly what Abram and Sarai set out to do, and maybe we just should say Abram set out to do, happened, and yet the plan horribly, horribly backfires as she's taken in to Pharaoh's house. Go ahead.
But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Avram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had.
All right, so he does get that material blessing. They send him on his way with Sarai and everything he had. So he lets him keep the material blessing, which is crazy to me that he doesn't demand it back or anything like that. But he gives him that material blessing and lets him go on his way. "What have you done to me?" Pharaoh says. "How could you trick me like this?"
Yeah, crazy that he doesn't make him give all the stuff back, and crazy that he doesn't kill him for deceiving him. Like,
sure.
The way that it actually turned out is kind of, pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we need to remember that the big 13 that shows up in your Bible, the next chapter break, remember that wasn't in your original Bible. So we need to ignore that big old 13 verse 1, and we need to keep reading as if this is the same story. So keep going into chapter 13, Brent.
This is the same story. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord.
Brent, have you heard those verses before? Any of that sound familiar?
Yeah, and it even tells you right in the text where his tent had been earlier. Like, hey, remember, same place we talked about before.
So these last few verses walk literally directly backwards out of the land, the same exact way he walked into the land. So the beginning of the story had him going A, B, C, and then the end of the story has him going back out C, B, A. So there's a first part which mirrors the last part. Brent?
We got a chiasm.
We got a chiasm. So of course you can actually follow those pieces all the way through, and you can find that the center is going to be that center paragraph where Pharaoh takes her. In fact, verse 15, and I think this is a pretty easy chiasm, relatively, at least easier than some of the tricky ones we've looked at, for all of our listeners to kind of toy with and see on their own. But give me the center verse. Happens to be verse 15.
And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace.
All right. So as Rabbi Foreman taught this chiasm, he said, what's the lesson of the chiasm? The lesson of the chiasm for Avram is that things don't always go as planned. You can't control the circumstances like you think you can. Like this idea that we can control things, this idea that I'm going to come up with a foolproof plan and it's going to work. Avram learns in this story, that's all an illusion. You don't have the control you think you have. You can have your best laid plans, and Avram gets reminded, do what's right, trust the story, trust God to take care of the rest. This is what Avram learns in Genesis chapter 12 and beginning of 13. Genesis 12, Avram's lesson is things don't. So we have seen the character of Avram. We've seen some beautiful stories, some beautiful, like a heart for justice. We've also seen Avram make some pretty tough mistakes, which I could relate with, Like I would make some of those same mistakes, and yet there are some consequences of those mistakes. Ends up hurting. So Avram. So now the question is Avram going to let this? Is Avram going to let this define his story?
I'm trying to like put myself in his shoes and think about like, okay, the deception in Egypt was definitely a bad plan. That didn't work out.
Yep.
But was it bad to go to Egypt in the first place?
Yeah,
I think
who knows? Right.
We look at Egypt and we're like, oh, he shouldn't be there. We know what's going to happen in Egypt later, but Avram doesn't know that at this point. And everyone goes there. Like I'm thinking about today, like if my cupboard is empty,
yep,
I'm going to go to the grocery store. That's just what everybody does.
Yep.
When there's a famine in their land, you go to Egypt. That's just what everybody does.
Yep.
So is Egypt really the bad thing at this point? Like, I don't even know. Like, what is their understanding of Egypt? We're trying to put ourselves in Abraham's shoes and say, okay, what did he know about Egypt at that time?
Yep.
Because we're looking at the Exodus, we're looking at all the slavery and all this other stuff that happens, but he doesn't know that at this point. So
absolutely,
we got to give him credit for that part of it, even though he does ultimately make a pretty bad plan and his deception does not work out. Although it does work out, like,
yep.
And you can say that's by the grace of God because, wow, like, what, for real, why would Pharaoh not just kill him? Like,
yep.
Oh, you deceived me? No, thank you.
Yeah.
You're out. I'm going to keep your wife. Done.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see if this is a bigger problem than just that. If this follows him, if this follows with him, we'll find out. What is interesting for me in this immediate moment is whether or not this is going to wreck his story. He's made a big mistake. Is this going to derail what he's up to? So let's go ahead and keep reading and see what we find out about this guy named Avram.
Now Lot, who was moving about with Avram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Avram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Avram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Avram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Avram after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are, to the north and the south, to the east and the west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Avram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord.
All right, now as I hear that, I want to keep that same Bema question in mind. What are the problems as I read this story? What are the problems that stick out to me? And I've got a couple problems. Number one, there was a really weird verse about the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Did you notice it as you were reading through, Brent?
I did. Yeah, it felt weird as I was reading it.
It's so weird, but it already showed up once. It showed up in chapter 12, verse 6. It was the same weird thing. And I sneakily didn't say anything about the weirdness the first time. But now I'm bringing it up. There's another weird thing. He calls Lot his brother. Is Lot his brother?
Yeah, well, and as I read it in the new NIV, it is close relatives is how they translate it, but yes.
Oh, I forgot about that in the new NIV. That is right. The new NIV fixes that.
They fix it a little bit.
Yep, and in a lot of translations, it will just say brother, because it's the same word for brother, and yet the new NIV is trying to well, wait a minute, that's not right. So in their translation, they're trying to catch the squishiness of that word, but they didn't do the same thing in the last chapter. They just said sister. So it's the translators trying to they're awkwardly trying to deal with the reality of the translation. And yet the original text is purposely trying to draw these. The first story was about a sister who wasn't really his sister. This story is about a brother who really wasn't a brother. The first story mentioned the Canaanites and the Perizzites. The second story mentions the Canaanites and the Perizzites. These stories, as Rabbi Foreman taught it, are supposed to be linked. The author wants you to say what's happening in this story is connected to what happened in the last story. So as Foreman phrased it, originally when I first heard him teach this, he said, as we think about this story, we should be wondering if Abraham's learned anything. Has Abram learned anything from his time in Egypt? And it would seem like he has. The story is about him sitting in a field and arguing with Lot. Remember, let's remind ourselves, why did we say that Abram brought Lot, Brent?
Because that's how he assumes he's going to become a great nation.
Yeah, that's the most logical explanation of how he's going to have descendants. And what was the thing he just learned? What was the lesson he just learned in Egypt?
He learns that things don't always go as planned.
Absolutely. He's learned that you can't control those circumstances. So what is he? He had this best plan. He had a plan with Lot, just like he had a plan when he went down to Egypt. And now Abram sits around and he looks at his circumstances and he says, well, I know that I can't sit here and argue with my brother in a field. Have we heard a story, Brent, already in the Genesis narrative about two brothers arguing in a field?
Yeah, and that one didn't work out very well.
No, ended up with one brother killing the other one, Cain and Abel, right? So Avram's like, well, I know I can't sit here and argue with Lot. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm going to let God figure out the rest. And so and again, notice the character traits. Here's Abram and Lot. Who's the patriarchal right holder? Who's the one that has the patriarchal upper hand?
Abram does.
Abram. Lot's the nephew. Avram's the patriarch in charge of his Beit Av. Lot's a part of it. And yet what does Abram do? He lets Lot what?
He lets him pick.
He lets him pick. He says, I want you to pick. And it says that Lot looks up and he sees all this stuff. There's actually some fun things to say about that, but we'll keep moving. And Abram doesn't even look up in the story until God tells him to. God says, now, Abram, now that you've shown me your character, now that you've let Lot go first and you let Lot pick, now I want you to lift your eyes. And I want you to look because this is what your blessing's going to be. So Abram lets his best, logical, most reasonable plan go. He brought Lot so that God could make good on his promise. But he also knows he's not going to get to God's promise by doing the wrong thing. So he lets Lot go and he says, oh, well, God's promise is God's problem. I'm going to let God figure out God's promises and I'm going to let Lot go. Let's keep reading and see what happens. Well, let's not actually keep reading because we'll save ourselves some time. Genesis 14, we read about these kings. So Lot has picked the land of where?
The plains. I was actually trying to untangle all the geography stuff in the last chapter, and I don't quite have it sorted out. But yeah, he's down near Sodom.
Yep, he has pitched his tents near Sodom, right? So he's in Sodom, and all the kings go to war in the land. Shouldn't bother Abram, not that big of a deal, except the problem is his nephew is now living with the kings that are now at war, and they get and he gets captured. And so Abram takes his household, crazy story, as the Jews tell it, 318. Well, the text tells us there's a certain amount of people he takes with him from his household as Beit Av. He's got quite a size of a Beit Av after he came out of Egypt, right, Brent?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is no small family. He's now got quite the Beit Av between his servants and all the people that are now in his household, and they go off to rescue Lot.
The order of the stuff that he got, it was sheep and cattle,
yep,
male and female donkeys, male and female servants,
yep,
and camels, which is like,
right.
Why are they in that order? I don't know. But yeah, apparently quite a few people involved in that because he now has 300, not just 318 people, but he has 318 trained men.
Yeah.
That's what it says here in chapter 14.
And there's a fun little midrash there, but I digress. We'll talk about that some other time. It's no small feat. Even though he has that many people in his household, to go defeat a bunch of kings feels historically ridiculous. And yet the story tells us he goes and he conquers the kings. He's rescued Lot, and the king of Sodom comes out to speak to Abram after he's defeated these kings. And go ahead and read Genesis 14:21.
The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself."
So the king comes to Abram and says, all right, listen, you've defeated us. Keep all the goods, keep the spoils of war, but can you give me my people back? I care about my people. The king of Sodom says, I care about my people. You can keep all the stuff, keep the money, keep all the loot, but give me my people back. And Abram, go ahead and give me the last few verses here of the chapter.
But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "With raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me, to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share."
All right. So anything that's been consumed or somebody else's goods, I'm going to leave that up to them. But other than that, I'm giving it all back. I hear, and I think Foreman taught me this as well. I hear Abram listen to the king of Sodom, and I hear Abram go, oh, that's good. The king of Sodom has a heart for his people. He wants his people back. Yeah, no, you should get your people back. You know what? You should have all your stuff back. I'm not going to take anything. I've sworn an oath. I'm not going to take any of the loot. I'm not going to take any of the spoils. I'm just going to give it all back to you. And if he gives it all back to him, especially and particularly the people, who does he give back to the king of Sodom?
Lot.
Lot, which is, and I've heard people listen to me teach this, and then they say, no, he didn't give Lot back. But of course he did. A, because we're told he gave the people back. But B, the next time we find Lot in the story, where is he, Brent?
He's in the gates at Sodom.
He's in the gates at Sodom. Like, he gives Lot back, which he essentially doubles down on trusting the story in Genesis 14. He trusted the story in Genesis 13, and he doubles down on trusting the story in Genesis 14. It's Avram's way of saying, because if I was in Avram's shoes, I would be like, oh, I trusted the story in Genesis 13, and now God's given me Lot back. And now I trusted the story in God, but he doesn't. He trusts in the right thing. He trusts in justice. He does exactly what the king asks. He restores everything back to him. And he again doubles down and says, I'm going to let God figure out how this is going to work. I'll let God make good on his promise. Abram has learned. What I love about this episode and the portion of text we're looking at in these 3 chapters is Abram makes a mistake, learns a lesson, and does not let the mistake define him. He does not let the mistake become his story. He learns from his mistake, and he goes right back into trusting the story. It's like he believes exactly what God asked Cain to believe. Why is your face downcast? If you do, yes, you've made a mistake. But if you do the right thing, won't you be accepted? It's like Abram believes that. It's like Abram says, yeah, okay, I will. I'm going to trust the story. I've made a mistake, but I'm going to trust that if I do the next right thing, this story can still be redemptive. I love it. So there you go, Brent. That's my thoughts for the episode today.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, like, wait, really? Like, just do a search in your Bible app for Lot or Bible Gateway or whatever, and just, have everything show up in order. So it's Genesis 14:16. Abram retrieved all of his stolen property. He also brought back his nephew Lot and his possessions, as well as the women and the rest of the people. Then, of course, we see the king of Sodom ask for the people back. And then the very next appearance of the word Lot, the name Lot, is Genesis 19. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. So there he is. Go check it out, read it, dig into the text, look for these details, look for these problems. When you start to dig into this stuff, it's very exciting. It's very fun because there's so much there that we just read over when we're used to these stories.
Amen and amen.
Okay, well, if you have any questions, any comments, if you want to find a group, any of that stuff, you can go to BamaDiscipleship.com. Poke around the website. There's lots of stuff to find, lots of show notes, lots of resources. Everything that we have is there. And if you can't find what you're looking for, you can use the contact page to get in touch. So thanks for joining us on the Bama Podcast this week. We'll talk to you again soon.
Hey everyone, I'm Kayla, a Bama listener in Jacksonville, Florida. Here's the prayer from episode 9's companion. God, things do not always go the way that I planned. Yet I'm so grateful for each new beginning. Thank you for calling me, for setting me apart, and for seeing all of us in our full humanity, yet choosing to partner with us again and again. I may not be perfect, I may stumble and fall, but I refuse to let my mistakes define me. Instead, may I choose to continue to trust the story, always seeking to do the next right thing. Amen.